The wilderness experience. When I was going to college, I read a book, and most of the book wasn't, I would say, completely relevant to wilderness therapy, but there was a line or I guess a half a paragraph that really stood out to me in this book, and I thought about it a lot. Chellis Glendinning said that in her book, she said that if you were to put humans in human form on a scale that we could make sense of, say a basketball court. So we'll say that humans have been in human form for just say like 100,000 years, just for argument's sake. That's very debatable, depending on which scientist you talk to, right? So you take that 100,000 years and you stretch that out over the length of a basketball court. She said we've only been in our modern civilizations, as we would call modern now, for the last 1/4 of 1 inch. The rest of that time, we as humans lived in harmony with the natural world. So when these young people come out to a wilderness therapy program in the middle of the winter, when it's 20 degrees out, snow's coming in sideways, shelter's flapping, they're cold, we've got a fire going, and they quickly adapt to that, it's not surprising to me. It's like, well, yeah, that's what we did for how many thousands of years. We lived in harmony with the natural world. We lived through those rainstorms, through those snowstorms. We lived through the heat in the desert and all of the above. And I've watched young people come into these programs and do just that. They come in and in the beginning it freaks them out and they are cold. But over a short period of time, they adapt, and they adapt really well. And so not only do I believe that part of the wilderness experience is just being immersed in the wilderness and having that opportunity to adapt in that way, but part of that wilderness experience is having the opportunity to just connect with the wilderness on a different level than what I would say a large portion of our young people in America get to right now. For example, I remember sitting under a tree having a one-on-one with this young man, and he was having a hard time focusing on what I was talking about. And at first I was getting a little frustrated with him. I was like, come on, like trying to do this, and you're off in some other place. And then I looked up and he was watching a bird on a tree. And so I just stopped talking, and I just sat there and I watched this bird with him. And then he started to giggle, and he was watching this bird dance around and do this little dance. And then on the other side of the tree on another branch, there was another bird. And he was imagining, he had heard that birds will do these courting dances. And whether this bird was doing that or not, I have no idea. I couldn't focus enough because I was still watching him. Like I was just like awestruck by this experience. And he was watching this bird dance, and he would giggle, and then he would describe it to me. He's like, yeah, it's like this bird's like flipping his wings up and like, yeah, look at me, look at me. Look how cool I am. Watch this, I'm gonna do this, watch this move. Oh, you like that, And he was relating with this bird through other experiences that he'd had in life. And, he likes hip hop music. And so he was relating it to the hip hop culture and how a hip hop dancer would dance. And it was just this experience that just left me awestruck. Like, wow, this kid's never just sat and watched a bird before. He has no idea what that's all about. For the next week, every bird that would fly overhead, he would ask me, what's that bird? What's that bird? What's that bird doing? Can you hear that? Can you hear that bird? And I couldn't answer all those questions. I didn't know. But I encouraged it. I encouraged him to, yeah, pay attention to that. Watch the birds. And then we started talking about the wind. There's a lot of wind in our course area here at Red Cliff. And we talked about the wind. And he wanted to know, like, why the wind? I gave him my very best explanation of wind. And I talked to him about the wind strengthening tree branches and the wind pollinating as the wind blows the pollen around the desert and different things like that. And even the destructive force of the wind and how it will reshape the landscape in the desert. And he was just it was like this aha moment of like, whoa, there's this whole world out there. And that when that kid came back to be a field staff in another program, and wasn't planned, but I was working in another program, and we got to work together. And he talked about the connection that happened while he was out. And if he wouldn't have been given the opportunity to come to a wilderness therapy program, he wouldn't have made that connection. He wouldn't have ever stopped to just pay attention to the wind, or watch a bird dance on a limb, or listen to the rain fall, or just the smell. He was like, wow, like I can smell this stuff, like it's raining and I can smell these smells. You know, and he would want to talk about it, like, what is that? Like, what am I smelling? And again, like, I didn't have all the answers, still don't to this day, but I gave him my very best explanation. And it was a life-changing experience. But I think that happens on different levels. That was probably the most intense that I've witnessed in wilderness therapy, was that young man. But on different levels, I've watched that happen with so many young people. They're having this experience where they're out, they're connecting with nature in ways that they've maybe never had the opportunity to connect before. And if they did have the opportunity before, they couldn't slow down everything else that was going on enough to focus in and just exist and allow that connection to happen. I think in wilderness therapy, we not only provide that opportunity, but we also talk about it. So we give the students in wilderness therapy a language that they can use to describe it. And each program, I think, has a different lingo a little bit, but nevertheless, they're giving them a way that they can articulate some of those experiences, and they're encouraging it. You know, different programs will, like here at Red Cliff, I can speak about Red Cliff. Right now, they actually have assignments that they complete, and they'll have like plant identification assignments. They'll have cloud assignments where they'll identify clouds in the sky, and they'll identify constellations. They'll identify animal tracks and animals as they see them, and they'll identify a few different trees or lizards. And you know, I've worked with kids in the field that once they start exploring that and they get into it, their imagination just runs wild. It's just this whole new world, this whole new experience for them. And I would carry a couple books throughout the years. It was a different book that I would carry that would talk about the flora and fauna and identify the lizards. And I've spent weeks with certain kids that wanted to identify lizards. Mm-hmm. You know, and they would be so excited to identify lizards. And the letters that they would write home, that was one of the things that their parents would pick up on right away. It's like, my kid's in the desert identifying lizards right now. Like, it was everything I could do to just get him to turn off his computer or his video game or to quit smoking pot or, you know, whatever it was. And so for me, if I was to use some of my own personal lingo around that experience, it's magical. It really is magical. But it's not surprising to me that it happens. Knowing that humans continue to this day in other places live in harmony with the natural world. They rely on the forests and the deserts for life, to help them stay alive. So it's not surprising to me that these young people come into a wilderness therapy program and they adapt to that and they connect. And then just being young humans, they're curious. And for most of them, it doesn't take much to pique their curiosity.
So it's magical because it's so different from what we might experience in ordinary modern life. But it's not surprising because it's a predictable and a consistent outcome of what we do. So what is it that you do at Red Cliff that makes that happen, that provides that access to the wilderness experience for the students? What is it that you do, that the staff does, that makes that come alive?
We do a couple things, quite a few things, actually. Sleeping on the ground, for one, and just like, you're laying down on the earth and connecting in that way. We're making bow drill fires. We're gathering spindles and fireboards off of sage plants and yucca stalks and the bow from a juniper tree. And so we're using the resources that are provided to fulfill these tasks. And on one hand, yes, we do use fire for cooking dinners and staying warm and things like that, but the act of just doing a bow drill fire, which is a topic we could talk about for probably a long time, but there's so much metaphor that comes out of that, and our staff get to be very skilled at bringing it back and talking about the connection that's made by gathering those things from the natural environment. The plants providing those materials for us.
So let me just ask, do you take the materials to the students, or do you take the students to the materials at Red Cliff?
We take the student to the materials.
So you take them to the live plant?
Yes, we do. We take them to live sage, but we have a lot of dead and down juniper trees in our course area, so when we're gathering the bows, we would try and get them off of a tree that's not completely rotten but already down.
Yeah.
So, but yes, we do take them to the live plants.
What's the difference in the experience of having someone bring you the materials versus having you walk to the materials and harvest it yourself? I think that there's more opportunity to make that connection with when you're harvesting the materials yourself. And that's just what I've witnessed. I guess that's what I buy into and prescribe to. I like going to the plant, talking about the plant, talking about the uses of the plant, like some medicinal purpose, or just the beauty of the plant being there, or how it holds the earth back from eroding and different things like that, and how we want to selectively cut pieces off that plant to where we're not going to kill it, that it can continue to grow and flourish. And so I think it's from my perspective, there's more opportunity to make that connection in that way when they go to the material. Now, regardless of whether we take them to the material or somebody brings them the material, the actual process of bowing to get a bow drill fire, I don't think it would change that at all. We do require our students here, they have to cut the material and then they have to use stone tools to sharpen their spindles, cut their notch, make their first fire kit. They can have a few cuts with a saw on each end. We don't want them hauling around great big chunks just to be weight conscious in their packs, really. And we want to set them up for success. So if we've got somebody that's just working their heart out trying to get this fire, day 7, whatever, I don't know, it would vary depending on the kid. Maybe it's day 1 and they've been at it for 7 hours. That's not to say that a staff member wouldn't assist them in some way. Maybe even flattening a fireboard with a knife because it's just not working, or something like that. But for the most part, they make it with stone tools and they go through the whole process themselves. And what sort of materials do you have for stone tools?
You can find, at the outpost, the Red Cliff property that's in our course area, we have a flint knapping pit there, and we will allow students, if they're close by, we'll allow them to pull flakes of obsidian. But outside of that, it's basically any rock that you could use that has a sharp edge. We'll use big rocks, for instance, with a nice square edge, to rub the whole fireboard on there to start the notch. You typically have them stop so they don't have this big gaping notch in there, but to get it started, that'll remove material quickly. So really, it's any rock that they can find that has a sharp edge that will hold an edge. And we don't have any obsidian here. We have some different types of quartz. We have, you can find pockets of a chert type rock out here.
But bringing obsidian in, or trading obsidian, carrying obsidian
Mhm.
long distances is traditional to
It
this
is.
area of the country.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can actually find areas where somebody was obviously living there.
Hmm.
And typically, if you find obsidian flakes there, you're going to find pottery and other remnants of people that lived there too.
Yeah.
We don't allow them to pick any of the other stuff up, pottery, arrowheads, all of that. But if it's just a random piece of obsidian lying on the ground, typically I'll encourage them, like, well, you're still using a stone tool, you might want to
Hmm.
consider that.
And at what point do they get knives?
They can get a knife. It's after they've progressed through the program a ways. They're usually here. I would say the average student stays here 8 to 10 weeks. So usually halfway through the program, week 4 or 5, they could be eligible. And it's all dependent on the trust that they have, that they've gained with the staff and their therapists, and just how they're excelling in the program. But trust is the big factor right there. So with some students, they don't get their knife until week 7 or 8, and then others that are, really doing a good job, and they have trust, and they're functioning as a leader, they could get a knife as quickly as 5 weeks typically.
Thanks for watching. Please like this video and subscribe. The Primitivus Project is made possible by the generous sponsorship of Wingate Wilderness Therapy. To learn more, visit wingatewilderness.therapy.com.